Hello, welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So in this video I'd like to talk about the current cold snap we're having and how it's quite a lot more severe than I was expecting for this part of the world. So I'm here in North Scotland, and where I used to live in North Scotland it used to get down to -20 occasionally, and it used to also get down to -16, 18 most years, -20 occasionally. But I've moved to a part of North Scotland which is close to the sea, and so I wasn't expecting it to get too cold, probably -10 or so. All the climate maps say we're in zone 8, so -10 or so would look like a feasible temperature. So it's currently 5 to 9. The clock's wrong because it's getting the European time, but you can see there it's currently -13, and last night it was close to -15. It was -14.8. So it's really quite cold at the moment. Much colder than I was expecting, so I might have to readdress some of my plans for the garden just with the how cold it is. The last few winters we've been very lucky here in Scotland. It's only been about -5 or so. There's been a couple of years where it didn't even get down to -5, but this year it's much more like a normal winter, or maybe even slightly colder. So as I say, -15, a lot colder than I was expecting. What's made it even more difficult is the unexpected nature, because it was actually forecast to be -6 last night, and -15 is a lot colder. The other problem we had is we had a very cold snap probably about 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to be -3 according to the weather forecast, but it was -10, and I had to then run outside and grab a few plants. So I've got my greenhouse here. I haven't finished setting it up yet, so it's still got some glass missing, but I had a few plants sheltered in there because it's sheltered from the wind, and there's a tiny bit of temperature protection because it does have quite a lot of glass still, but everything had to be taken out of there. And with it getting down to -15, I did actually put my rose plants in here. I say I've not really made a start on this greenhouse, but I'm a little concerned that because they're in pots, -15 could be a bit cold for them. You can see the buds are already damaged on this. I've seen roses damaged in Switzerland at -20. Normally in Scotland we don't need to worry about roses getting damaged, but if they're in pots there's a chance there might be. Also, these were from a nursery from South England and they haven't had long to acclimatise, so I'm hoping they're not too badly damaged, but it's certainly not looking too great. And the other problem I had was a conservatory here, so because it got so cold, it's been a bit of a struggle to keep that warm enough. The heating system does a good job down to -10, but when we got that -15 last night, it really did get quite cold. So I'll take you inside later on and show you what I had to do to make sure that the temperatures remained above 10 degrees in there. I need to keep it 8 degrees above freezing in there as it is below freezing outside. So for example, if it's -15 outside, ideally I'd probably keep the inside temperature at +15. The reason being, if there's any stagnant air in there or any plants right next to the wall, and the walls aren't very insulating, they're quite thin, the cold will seep in from the outside. If it's 10 degrees on the inside and if it's -15 outside, there's a chance that it could get down to -5 in 1 or 2 spots if there was no insulation. With the small insulation I do have, it'll probably get down to -1 or 2, so I need to be careful that we don't get a couple of spots in the conservatory that do get down to freezing. I also had to move my plants away from the windowsills, so there's a couple of plants in the windowsills upstairs, but I had to move all my Phalaenopsis orchids away from the windowsill, even though I don't have any curtains up yet because we're still renovating the house. We did actually get quite cold air coming in from the window, just because they're not the best insulated. They're double glazed, but they're 30 years old double glazing, so they're not up to modern standards. So there was a very slight cold temperature coming in, and that caused a cold spot right next to the windowsill. So I moved all the Phalaenopsis orchids away, as they really can't handle any cold at all. But when it comes to the garden itself, I'll talk a bit about the cold weather in this part of the world. We were quite close to the coast, so we're only about 4 or 5 miles from the coast, and so normally we get the coastal influence, which helps us. So the only time that we can really get cold weather is days like today, where it's really clear skies and there's not any wind whatsoever. Because the UK is surrounded by the Gulf Stream, and it's the waters are relatively warm, about 5 to 10 degrees depending on the time of year, maybe a bit more than 10 in the summer. But this time of year they're probably about 5 degrees, 6 degrees or something, the waters around Scotland. So if you get any wind at all, even if that cold air is originating from the North Pole, which isn't too far from us, or even Siberia, but it's coming over Russia, if it's -30, -40 degrees Celsius air coming across the sea, it normally warms up to about 0 or -1, -2 going over that warm water, so it doesn't get too cold when it gets here. So any wind, and we can't get severe cold, we can still get 1 or 2 degrees below freezing, but it's difficult for severe cold. But if we don't have any wind at all like today, what happens is the cold air sinks down from the mountains, it collects in the valleys, we get a temperature inversion where it's actually colder at the ground level and warmer up in the air, and we don't get any wind blowing some warmer air from the sea over to us, so that's where we can get these severe cold snaps. One of the problems with these cold snaps is you can get them in the middle of summer, so you can get a touch of frost in June, July. It is possible, but very rare, and it's quite common to get frost in May. So that's my biggest problem in this part of the world. It's normally not the extreme cold, because normally there's a bit of wind or there's a bit of a moderation from the extreme cold, so -15. I don't think we'll get much colder than this in this location, but as I say, in some parts of Scotland, -20, -30 is possible. And the other ingredient we need to get this cold is deep snow cover. So because the ground emits a slight amount of warmth, even when it's well below freezing, and even if the top layer of the ground is frozen, there's still a bit of warmth coming from the ground. That keeps the temperatures up, so it's hard to go really below -10 unless you've got snow cover. We got about 15-20 centimeters today, and that's just enough to insulate it to -15, which did concern me a bit because 15-20 centimeters isn't very deep snow, and when we used to get -20, that used to be more like 1 or 2 foot of snow. So I'm concerned that there is potential in this new garden to even get -20. Last night, as I say, it was clear, there was no wind, but we weren't in the middle of a high pressure, we were only on the edge of a high pressure. So if we were in the middle of the high pressure, and we had much deeper snow, maybe say 2 foot or a metre, I think there is the potential for -20 in this garden. Hopefully that will never happen, but it is a potential. So the good thing with the frost only happening when it's deep snow is, to be honest, the ground doesn't get too cold. So I actually have a thermometer which is buried in snow, and most of last night it was registering about -1, -2, which is no problem whatsoever. Most roots and plants will be fine with that. So fortunately, when we get a hard frost, the ground is covered, anything herbaceous should be fine. And in this back garden area, I'm going to be doing like a tropical theme. A lot of them are going to be herbaceous perennials, and they're going to be tropical herbaceous plants like banana or gingers or cannas. I can just cover them with lots of mulch, and if there's snow on top of that, the frost shouldn't get too deep, maybe 15-20 centimeters into the soil. But with enough mulch, that shouldn't be an issue. But any shrubs, any tropical shrubs could be a problem. So I was thinking of tetrapanics. It looks like that might be herbaceous for quite a few years. Unless you have a mild winter, it's probably going to be an herbaceous plant, because the frost will just kill the stems off right down to the roots. I certainly had that in my old garden in central Scotland. We used to have fuchsias, and every year the fuchsia would get killed right down to the roots and just kind of regrow as a herbaceous plant. So it looks like that might be the situation here. Might get very hard frosts. Ground level and root level will be fine, but the stems and any branches might get destroyed, so I need to keep that in mind. So I think that's about it for this outside section. Say certainly very cold. I'll maybe show you some of the conservatory now, so how that's been struggling with the cold. And it's interesting to see everyone's gas boilers today are working overtime, plenty of steam billowing out of them just to keep warm. As I say, it is surprisingly cold. -15 last night. Currently still about -12. Pretty chilly, but so I'll probably need to redesign this greenhouse slightly. As I say, it's missing some glass. I need to fix that. What I might try and do is some kind of heating system. I'm not sure what yet. I was hoping for thermal mass with water barrels possibly, but the issue with that is if you have days of cold weather, or if you don't have sunshine, or very weak sunshine like we have here in North Scotland, it won't protect you against hard freezers like this. It'll only help against slightly cold temperatures. So that's it for the outside section. I'll just quickly go into the conservatory and show you what I've been doing in there. So here we are in the conservatory. It does look a little bit messy at the moment. I've got a lot of plants in here that should have been in the greenhouse, such as the pelargoniums down here, the geraniums. They would have been in the greenhouse, but as I say, it's too cold. I haven't got the greenhouse set up yet for them. So the problem I've had here is, as I say, cold pockets. The radiator last night was struggling at -15. It was getting down to 8 degrees. I'll just actually check what the minimum was. I haven't actually had a look yet this morning. So have a look now. It's 10.5, but I have got a couple of things in here to keep the temperature up slightly. So I got down to 8.9 last night, which isn't terrible, but this isn't in a cold section of the conservatory. I know 1 or 2 places did get below freezing. So it was 8.9. So what I have here is I've got this radiator. That kicks out quite a lot of heat. I can't remember the exact specifications, but it's about 1.5 kilowatt of thermal output. That runs off my gas central heating. That was working okay, until we got to about -10. At -10, this conservatory was struggling to keep warm. What I currently have is I actually have the temperature controls here set up for 14 degrees. Slightly warmer on here because this grow box actually has a heater inside just to keep it warm, so there's a bit of heat coming out. But when that's set at 14, it normally means that on the ground level down here it's around 12 degrees. As you can see, it's 10.6 at the moment, so it's not actually been able to keep it quite at 12, but it's not worked too bad. But when I came in last night, this about midnight when it was -15, this, instead of saying 14, said it had gone down to about 12 degrees, so I knew that the radiator was no longer working well enough. What I did then was I unplugged my extractor fan. This would have come on this morning, but this would have sucked in so much cold air, I think it would have gone below freezing in parts of the conservatory, so I unplugged that. I used that to deal with the humidity. And to increase the heat in here without putting an electric heater in, because I don't actually have one at the moment. As I say, there is a 150 watt heater in the grow box, but that's nowhere near power enough to keep this place warm. So what I did is I set up my fan down here. Normally it's at the top. This fan, it's blowing against the radiator. The reason for that is just to increase the airflow. If I can get good airflow around the radiator, I can just basically draw the heat out the radiator at a faster rate. Also, this being low down, it's putting the air from a low down cold place up to a higher place. It's mixing the air. I really need that air circulation so I don't get cold pockets. For example, down here where I've got my elephant foot vine, there's quite a cold pocket can form between the grow box and the edge of the conservatory, and also the corners. I try and keep the corners free of plants in winter, but right in the corner there can easily be potential issues with severe cold, because the cold can creep in. And the other thing I did to keep the temperatures up, because I don't have a strong enough electric heater, was to use my dehumidifier. Not to keep the humidity down, because that's not a problem when it's this cold, but it was actually just to provide some heat. This runs at about 300 watts, 350 watts, and because it condenses water out the air, it actually produces more heat than 300 watts. Whenever you turn a gas into a liquid, you produce a lot of heat. And that's what was happening with this. So when this condenses water, even though you're only using 300 watts of electricity, you can put out up to 600 watts of heat. So that was running last night. It's turned itself off now because the humidity has got below 50%, and I don't really want to get in too much lower than 50% humidity. Otherwise, the plants are going to start drying out and having dry air issues. But generally, what I've been doing is I've been having this running last night. I did actually spray water over the floors to try and get the humidity up, just so that I could then have this running overnight, and it seems to have worked. The temperature, let's say, hasn't gone below 8.9. 8.9 is the coldest it was when I came in here at -15 last night before I set the system up, and it's been running about 11, so it's not terrible. Ideally I'd like it a bit warmer in here, but it's not too bad. Some of my plants might suffer. What I've done is I put some of the plants higher up, so I've got a very old, very leggy poinsettia here which desperately needs pruning, but I put that up near the radiator. A couple of other plants that like it warmer I put near the radiator as well, and just higher up, because higher up it'll be warmer, the cold air will be sinking down to the bottom. So I think that's about it for this update. As I say, it's been much colder than I was expecting. I'm supposed to be about zone 8 according to the maps and the local climate area. I've checked the local weather meter. Unfortunately, the closest weather meter is about 1 mile away from the sea. I'm more like 5 miles away from the sea, and they're recording temperatures of about -9 today, so it's about 6 degrees difference. And that weather centre is generally what my forecasts go off of, and also for the climate zones, I think they might take that into consideration. So although I thought this was more like a zone 8 climate, I think I might be closer to a zone 7, potentially even a zone 6 if I do get those -20s at times. But we'll just have to see how it goes. But I have seen several cordylines in my neighbourhood, and cordylines normally die at -15, or at least down to the root level. So it'll be interesting to see what happens to them. None of the cordylines in my area are taller than about 2 meters, and in 2010 was the last time when we had really cold temperatures. I reckon they have probably been growing for the last 11 years. Now they're going to die back down to the ground. So I was planning to have a cordyline. That's probably going to be my most sensitive plant, apart from my tetrapanics. The cordyline, I think I'll probably get away with most years, but I will have to wrap it up, keep it warm in the coldest spells, because it looks like every now and again, maybe every 5 or 10 years, I might get -15, -20, and I'll need to wrap that to make sure it keeps the trunk. But otherwise, I'm not going to change my plans for the garden. I'm still going to go for a tropical theme. I'm just going to have to think more about making sure I've got a really good thick mulch, and keeping an eye on the temperatures quite closely and not relying too much on what the weather forecast is, because it seems to be quite unreliable when we get these very cold snaps. So that's all for this video. I'll see you guys in another update when I'll hopefully be doing some work in the garden, or maybe renovating the greenhouse over there.